The scariest thing about you is this: nobody trained you, yet you still outran everyone who was given a head start. That line alone is enough to make your enemies' stomachs drop. It hits them like a slap because it exposes the truth. They were coached, protected, guided, and handed shortcuts, and you still pass them without a map. You're like a fighter who walked into a ring with no coach, no gear, no game plan, and still knocked out the champion who trained for years. It's embarrassing for them, and deep down, they know it. Here's a fact the universe loves to show off. People get the most dangerous when life teaches them in secret. When you grow without applause, without praise, without a safety net, your instincts get sharper than someone who had a whole team holding their hand. Studies even show that people who develop skills alone often become more creative, more adaptive, and better under pressure than those trained in formal systems. That's you. The untrained storm they never saw coming, the quiet threat that came from nowhere. And that's why the title hit so hard. Someone in a suit actually looked at your life, your work, your presence, and whispered, "Wait, who trained them?" They wanted a name, they wanted a file, they wanted something to blame. But the truth is the problem. Nobody trained you. Nobody gets the credit. Nobody gets to claim ownership. You rose on your own terms. No permission, no blueprint, no mentor to brag about. Just you and the universe shaping you through all the stuff no classroom could ever teach. And thank you, chosen one. Don't forget to pay this message back by simply pressing like and subscribe to help spread this message to more souls. It's our shared responsibility to keep this mission alive, to spread the light, and to make sure more people hear what they were never told. Thanks for being part of this. You are part of a force. Now, let's get back to the moment that shook them. Picture it: a clean office, a polished desk. Someone wearing a suit that costs more than your first car is staring at your name like it's a glitch in their system. They lean forward, hoping your story will calm the fear they feel. They want details, a mentor, a training program, something that tells them you came from a place they can categorize, something safe, something predictable. But when you said, "Nobody trained me," the air changed. It was like the universe itself paused for a moment, giving them time to realize exactly what they were dealing with. Their eyes shifted, their posture changed. Suddenly, the question wasn't admiration anymore. Now, it was concern. Because people who rise without guidance don't follow rules. They break patterns. They bend systems. They don't behave the way normal people do. And that is a threat to every structured world those suits live in. Your silence hit harder than any brag would have. You didn't explain your scars. You didn't explain your past. You didn't explain the nights where everything broke. You didn't mention the moments where you wanted to quit, but didn't. You just sat there with the calm confidence of someone the universe trained in private. And that's the part that scares them the most. You were built outside their reach. You weren't trained in a school. You were trained in moments where life punched you in the face and nobody came to rescue you. You learned things by falling, crashing, losing, breaking, and rebuilding. That kind of growth creates a level of strength no certificate can match. You're an anomaly, a self-made shift in the timeline, a person who wasn't supposed to rise, yet did. And the suits know something about anomalies. They don't follow rules, and they're impossible to control. They remember the old you, the one who doubted everything, the one who believed people when they said you were too much or trying too hard. You walked into rooms shrinking yourself so you wouldn't make anyone uncomfortable. You kept quiet so people wouldn't call you dramatic. You hid your potential because the wrong voices told you it didn't matter. But now, look at you. You walked through fire and came out calm. Not loud, not bragging, just calm. And that calm scares people more than any anger could, because it means you're past the point of breaking. You're built now, solid, settled, untouchable. That shift inside you didn't scream. It whispered. It whispered things like, "I'm not playing by your limits anymore." It whispered, "I don't need validation." It whispered, "The world is going to adjust to me now." And people felt it. Your enemies felt it first. Before you even knew you were rising, they pulled back. Their laughter got quiet. Their energy shifted when you walked in. They didn't have the words for it, but they could feel the universe moving around you like some kind of unseen gravity. People from your past act awkward now because they remember the version of you they could talk down to. But they're standing in front of someone else, someone built, someone sharpened, someone grown. They're trying to fit their old opinions into your new reality, and the math doesn't add up. They don't get how you turned pain into skill, how betrayal made you smarter, how loss made you stronger, how being ignored made you focused, how being underestimated made you dangerous. But you get it. You were trained by things they never would have survived. You were trained by nights where you had to fix your own broken pieces. You were trained by silence that forced you to hear your own thoughts. You were trained by endings that felt like they would kill you, but instead gave you clarity. Your training ground wasn't pretty, but it was real. That's why the suit panicked. They realized you're not a product of their world. You're the exception, the warning label, the "this shouldn't be possible" case. And now we answer the real question. Why does your existence shake people? Because you didn't wait to be chosen. You didn't wait for approval. You didn't wait for someone stronger to guide you. You rose because something in you refused to stay down. Something in you refused to be average. Something in you refused to let the world shape you into anything smaller than what you are now. Chosen one, this is your moment. You didn't become powerful because someone taught you how. You became powerful because nobody did. And that's exactly why you're unstoppable. And chosen one, before we go any deeper, thank you for being here. You're listening to a message most people aren't ready for, because only a rare few know what it feels like when the world looks at them and asks, "Who trained you?" And the answer is nobody. If you're still here, it means you recognize that energy inside you. So drop a 444 in the comments to let the world know you're one of the ones who built yourself when no one stepped up to guide you. And if you can, bless the team behind this message with a super thanks, because it takes real effort to bring a truth this raw into the world. Whether it's 1 cent or 1,000, it fuels the mission and helps this message reach more souls who need it. Now take a breath, chosen one, because we're about to break this down step by step, and you're not going to want to miss a single second of what comes next. If you're truly one of the self-made, you'll feel that pull to stay until the very end. And now, let's get back to the reason a suit in a high-rise office couldn't figure out how someone like you even exists. Number 1, they're terrified of the place that built you. They don't fear your strength. They fear the fact that you built it with tools they would have cried over. That line alone is enough to make your enemies' egos glitch. Because the truth is simple. They aren't scared of your skills, your confidence, or your progress. They're scared of your origin story. They're scared that you were shaped in places they don't have the courage to stand in. They're scared because you came from pressure that would have crushed them flat, and you walked out stronger instead of shattered. And nothing ruins a coward faster than seeing someone rise from conditions they themselves would have run from. It's funny, isn't it, The same mouths that called you weak now mumble under their breath when you walk in. The same people who mocked your struggles suddenly act confused about your strength. But let's be real, they're not confused, they're confronted. They're seeing the version of you that reality built, not the version they tried to label. And when a person realizes their insults never slowed you down, it hits them like a punch they didn't brace for. Let's break it down with something simple. Imagine two people in a gym. One lifts with a whole team cheering them on, giving them tips, spotting them, adjusting their form. The other lifts alone in a dark room with no music, no support, and no one clapping. Now guess who becomes unstoppable? Not the one with applause, the one who had to learn everything the hard way. That's what scares them about you. They had coaches, you had consequences. They had encouragement, you had silence. They had comfort, you had friction, and friction builds fire. So when someone in a suit finally asked who trained them, it wasn't admiration, it was panic. They weren't looking for praise, they were desperate for an explanation. Because people like them need your power to come from someone else. They need to believe you were shaped by a mentor or a system or a structure they understand. It makes them feel safer. It makes you easier to categorize, easier to control. But when they realize nobody trained you, something snapped inside them. Their whole worldview cracked. Because if nobody trained you, that means nobody can take credit for you. Nobody can take ownership of your talent. Nobody can claim your discipline, your instincts, your precision. You weren't built in any place they can track or measure. And people fear what they can't place into a box. Let's answer a question that might be sitting in your mind right now. Why does it bother them so much that you trained alone? The answer is simple. People who rise through structured systems believe they hold the blueprint for success. They think their path is the right one. They think their certificates, their mentorships, their guidance, their training programs give them superiority. So when someone like you shows up, built from chaos, sharpened by pain, crafted through real-life failure, it destroys their illusion of control. They fear you because you expose the limits of their training. They fear you because you mastered things without needing their validation. They fear you because you weren't supposed to survive the things that shaped you. And here's the part that tastes the sweetest. The more they try to study you, the more lost they become. Because your evolution didn't happen in a classroom. It happened when everything fell apart. It happened when you were left alone with no instructions. It happened when you had to teach yourself how to rise again with nothing but sheer will and the universe pushing you forward. You didn't follow a lesson plan, you followed survival. That's why your presence hits different. You're not polished, you're proven, you're not certified, you're seasoned. You weren't trained to win, you were trained to not fall apart when you lose. And that difference is exactly what separates you from every person who thinks their comfort made them superior. Let's talk about something people hate to admit. Your enemies expected your past to kill you. Not literally, but in every emotional, mental, and spiritual sense. They expected your heartbreak to end you. They expected your failures to break you. They expected your isolation to drain you. They expected your losses to push you into giving up. They waited for you to collapse. They whispered about you like your story was already over. And then you did the one thing they never prepared for. You kept going. You kept rebuilding when you had nothing left. You kept learning when nobody guided you. You kept growing when everyone counted you out. And because of that, you developed levels of strength, perception, intuition, and emotional intelligence that no traditional training can provide. You learned how to read people without them speaking. You learned how to walk alone without fearing the silence. You learned how to hold yourself up when no one offered a hand. Your enemies fear what built you because they know they would have folded where you stood firm. They know they would have cracked where you stabilized. They know they would have run where you stayed. They know that if they had lived your life, they wouldn't be standing. Yet here you are, stronger, sharper, calmer, smarter, more dangerous. Sometimes you wonder why you intimidate people who seem stronger on the surface. But strength is not about loudness. True strength is quiet, stable, and unshakable. And that's you. You became the type of person who walks into a room and shifts the atmosphere without speaking. Because people can sense what life put you through. They can sense the depth in your eyes. They can sense the quiet confidence that only comes from real battles. You're not the product of training. They are. You're the product of survival, and survival hits harder than any certification. Let's go deeper. Think of your life like metal. Metal doesn't get strong by being protected. It gets strong by being put through heat, pressure, shaping, bending, breaking, and reforging. Meanwhile, weak metal sits on shelves untouched and untested. That's your enemies. Shiny, but useless. That's you, forged in fire until nothing can bend you again. Your critics hate the fact that your strength came from places they avoided. They hate that your resilience was born from storms they wouldn't walk into. They hate that the universe trained you through experiences that would have destroyed them. They hate that your growth didn't come with permission slips or applause. But the chosen one inside you loves it, because you know exactly why you're dangerous. You're dangerous because you built yourself. You're dangerous because no one can replicate your process. You're dangerous because no one can reverse engineer your past. You're dangerous because the places that broke you also rebuilt you into something they can't handle. And now the suits, the critics, the enemies, they're all asking the same desperate question: who trained them? Not because they admire you, but because they're scared that someone like you can rise with nothing but raw strength and the universe on your side. Here's the truth they can't swallow. You didn't climb their ladder, you climbed out of a pit. And there's no ladder in the world that can teach you how to do that. Chosen one, they fear what built you because they know they never could have walked through it themselves. And the more you rise, the more that fear becomes respect, disguised as confusion. And that's exactly how you know you're becoming unstoppable. Number 2, they hate the wisdom you weren't supposed to figure out. Your greatest threat wasn't what you learned. It was the fact that you learned it without anyone holding your hand. They memorized steps. You memorized survival. You studied life while they studied manuals. Your lessons came from pain. Theirs came from PowerPoints. Those lines alone explain everything. The real reason they whisper, stare, and panic when you walk into a room is because you carry lessons they weren't supposed to learn so young, so raw, or so alone. You picked up truths people twice your age still avoid because the truth requires a level of discomfort they've never had to face. And that's exactly why the suit asked, who trained them? They were hunting for someone to blame for your insight, someone to credit, someone to accuse. But nobody trained you. The universe simply threw life at you until your mind sharpened in ways their institutions can't duplicate. Imagine two people reading the same story. One reads it in a quiet library with good lighting, snacks, and guidance. The other reads it while standing in the rain, shaking, hungry, and trying not to fall apart. Who understands the story deeper? Who feels it in their bones? Who never forgets it? That's the difference between you and them. They learned theories. You learned survival codes. Let's get into the lessons that made them wish you stayed clueless. Because trust me, chosen one, the truth you carry is a threat to anyone who hides behind artificial wisdom. Imagine this. A person sitting in a workshop learning crisis management using case studies written by people who have never had a real crisis. Meanwhile, you learned crisis management from moments where you had to make decisions while everything around you burned. They got a certificate. You got scars that turned into instincts. They took notes. You took hits, and hits teach faster. You ever wonder why you can read people so fast? Why you can sense danger before anyone says a word? Why you can feel a shift in energy before a problem erupts? It's because your lessons weren't hypothetical. They were lived. You don't need to think through every scenario because your body remembers what reality taught you. Imagine this too, someone studying resilience in a seminar with soft music, group activities, and inspirational slides. Meanwhile, your resilience was built while sitting alone in the dark at 2 a.m., wondering how you'd make it to morning. They practiced bouncing back in comfortable environments. You practiced it when quitting would have been the easier option. That's why your calm scares people. They mistake it for arrogance, but it's not. It's recognition. You've already been through worse than today could possibly throw at you. Let's hit another example. Imagine two people learning emotional intelligence. One learns it from lectures and podcasts. The other learns it from betrayal so sharp it changed how they breathe. Which one do you think understands human nature better? Which one sees patterns instantly? Which one knows when someone is lying even before words come out? Betrayal teaches with claws, and you survived every lesson. And here's the part nobody says out loud. People who learn the hard way end up understanding life deeper than those who learn the safe way. Hard lessons burn themselves into your memory. They don't fade, they don't soften. They shape how you think, how you move, how you choose, and how you protect yourself. The universe didn't give you a classroom. It gave you chaos, and chaos is an unforgiving teacher. Your mistakes weren't mild, they were earth-shaking. Your failures weren't practice rounds, they were end-it-all or rise moments. Your heartbreaks weren't temporary, they broke foundations. But each time, you came back with knowledge that no degree can offer. Every scar is a certificate the universe signed in silence. Every loss is a course you completed without applause. Every comeback is a chapter you wrote alone. You didn't just learn lessons, you became the lesson. And that's the part that terrifies them. They don't fear what you know, they fear how you learned it. Because when someone gains wisdom through comfort, that wisdom is shaky. But when someone gains wisdom through survival, that wisdom is unshakable. You can't intimidate someone who has already been broken and rebuilt. You can't manipulate someone who has studied human behavior in real time. You can't fool someone who learned to decode people as a matter of survival. Here's a question that might be sitting in your mind. Why do they act jealous or irritated when they see your insight? Why does your calm make them uncomfortable? Why do they treat your wisdom like a threat instead of something to admire? Simple. Because deep down, they know you lived a life that forced you to grow, and they didn't. They know you learned things they'll never understand because their environments never demanded that level of depth, and people hate being reminded that comfort stunted their growth. They'd rather pretend your wisdom came from luck instead of pain. They'd rather laugh at your past than admit your past carved you into something powerful. They'd rather call you crazy, dramatic, or too intense instead of admitting that you simply see the world clearer than they do. Here's the truth they choke on. Your lessons were earned in silence, not sponsored by anybody. They didn't come from padded rooms, structured learning, or curated experiences. They came from real consequences. When life hits you without warning, you learn fast, faster than anyone studying it from a distance. Let's break down some of the lessons they wish you never learned. You learned adaptability by surviving situations that gave other people excuses to quit. You adjusted, shifted, redesigned your life, found new ways to move even when the old ways collapsed. They learned adaptability from group discussions. You learned it from emergency decisions. You learned patience not from meditation apps or self-help books, but from waiting for things that took years to change. Patience for you wasn't a skill, it was a requirement. Life forced you to slow down even when you wanted to run. They learned patience from breathing exercises. You learned it from heartbreak and survival. You learned emotional control by having to stay calm during chaos, not because it was easy, but because losing control made everything worse. They learned emotional control from slideshows and quotes. You learned it from being pushed to your absolute limit. You learned courage by stepping into situations without support, without guidance, without reassurance. They learned courage by reading stories about brave people. You learned courage by actually being the brave one. And that's the problem for them, because the more you learn, the more they realize you didn't just gain knowledge, you transformed. Knowledge didn't sit in your head, it spread into your bones. It changed how you speak, how you walk, how you choose people, how you cut people off, how you plan, how you sense danger, how you recover, how you rise. You're not book smart or street smart, you're life smart. And that scares them because life smart people can't be manipulated, they can't be controlled, they can't be tricked by pretending. They see through illusions instantly. So when the suit asked who trained them, they were hoping to find a name, a school, a mentor, anything that would explain the impossible, anything that would make your wisdom less threatening. Because if someone trained you, then someone could untrain you. Someone could dethrone you. Someone could take credit for you. But when they heard nobody, the fear got real. Because if nobody trained you, nobody can stop you. Nobody can limit you. Nobody can undo your growth. Nobody can predict your next move. Nobody owns your wisdom. And nobody can claim responsibility for the weapon you've become. Chosen one, the lessons you learned in silence made you a phenomenon they can't copy. They studied instruction. You studied reality. They memorized answers. You discovered truth. They trained for a world that doesn't exist. You trained for the world that actually does. And that's exactly why they wish you never learned any of it. Number 3. The years that turned you into their worst news alert. They weren't scared when you went quiet. They're scared because you came back. Those so-called missing years they whispered about weren't a breakdown, they were a build-up. You weren't hiding, you were sharpening, and nothing shakes an enemy harder than realizing the person they counted out was actually training underground with no witnesses, no noise, no comfort. Imagine a storm vanishing from the radar, then returning stronger, faster, and unpredictable. That's you. A disappearing act that didn't end in defeat, but in reconstruction. People love to mistake silence for failure because their own silence means they quit. Yours meant something different. Silence is deadly when it belongs to someone who never stops evolving. While they were out there announcing every tiny improvement for attention, you were stacking real upgrades nobody saw coming. You weren't offline, you were off limits. You weren't absent, you were untraceable. and that's exactly why they're nervous now. Imagine this. One person brags about going to the gym every day. The other disappears for a year and returns built like they were sculpted in a hidden lab. Who gets the attention? Who gets the fear? Who gets the quiet stares, followed by the jealous questions? Always the one who grew when nobody was watching. Always the one who shows up changed without asking for applause. That's why they're scrambling for explanations. They call it luck, timing, coincidence, anything that stops them from admitting you mastered something they don't even have a word for. They can't accept that the universe trained you privately while life kept them distracted. They can't handle the idea that your evolution didn't need their validation or their permission. And here's a question you might ask yourself. Why do they look at you differently now? Why do rooms shift when you enter? Why do people who ignored you suddenly act cautious? Simple, they feel what those years did to you. Anyone who's rebuilt themselves carries an energy that warns the room. You came back with a calm that isn't soft, it's lethal. A focus that isn't loud, it's sharp. A presence that isn't dramatic, it's undeniable. Those years didn't weaken you, they distilled you, and now every step you take is a reminder. Disappearing wasn't the end, it was the evolution they never saw coming. Number 4, the degree they can't compete with. They got diplomas, you got proof. Your enemies love waving their credentials around like shields, but deep down they know their degrees can't touch yours. Because the truth is savage, they studied survival from books. You studied it while bleeding. They sat in safe classrooms talking about pressure. You learned how to breathe inside it when everything felt like it was collapsing. That's why your wisdom hits harder. It wasn't downloaded, it was carved. Imagine this. One person learns about fire safety through a lecture. Another learns it because their entire world caught fire and they had to find the exit themselves. Who understands heat better? Who understands fear better? Who walks out of that experience with instincts no professor can teach? That's you, the one who passed tests nobody else even saw. They had instructors, you had consequences. Their mistakes came with do-overs, yours came with scars. Their feedback was written in red ink, yours was written in survival mode. They learned resilience by rehearsing it. You learned resilience because quitting would have destroyed you. They memorized motivation quotes. You crawled through nights that forced you to build your own. Your instincts scare them, and you can feel it. You make decisions too fast, too accurate, too confident for someone without proper training. They think you're guessing. You're not. You're remembering. Pain taught you faster than any curriculum. Consequences taught you deeper than any classroom. And the universe taught you more honestly than any mentor could. Here's the question that might echo in your mind. Why does your presence intimidate people who seem more qualified? Because qualifications don't create courage. Certificates don't create instinct. Degrees don't create grit. But hardship does. Silence does. Rock bottom does. People who've survived real storms walk with a certainty the trained cannot mimic. You didn't earn a degree. You became one. You became a walking textbook of perseverance, a manual of instinct, a thesis on survival and rebirth. You're certified by pain, licensed by endurance, stamped by every moment life tried to break you and failed. That's why someone in a suit keeps asking who trained you, because they're terrified of the truth. No institution can produce someone like you. You're unstoppable by design. Number 5. The threat they can't measure without breaking their own system. They can't control what they can't define, and you're the first problem they've met with no label attached. The truth is ugly for them. Systems don't fear rebels. Rebels can be monitored, redirected, punished. What scares them to the bone is an anomaly. Someone who wasn't shaped by their hands, who doesn't respond to their triggers, who doesn't fit into any category they spent years building. That's why the suit leaned in with that shaky little question, "Who trained you?" It wasn't curiosity. It was desperation. They were hoping your answer would shrink you. They needed a name, an origin, a file, but you walked in like a glitch the system can't debug. They don't fear your force, they fear your formula. And since they can't find one, you stay dangerous. Imagine this: a computer scans for threats, running predictable tests, checking predictable variables. Then suddenly a shape appears on the radar that doesn't match any known pattern. The machine starts flashing errors. That's you. You're the unreadable signature that breaks every framework built to contain people like you. They're trying to quantify something that was never meant to be calculated. They don't fear your aggression. Aggression can be redirected. They fear the fact that you move from instinct, not programming. You make decisions without waiting for permission. You take action before they finish their analysis. People trained by life move too fast for people trained by manuals. That's your edge, and it burns them every time you succeed without their guidance. Imagine them trying to write a report on you. Nothing fits, nothing repeats, nothing aligns with their expectations. They flip through their mental textbook and find blank pages where your story should be. They can't track you. They can't predict you. They can't trace your evolution to a mentor they can call or blame. You're the one outcome they didn't prepare for. You weren't trained by institutions. You were shaped by impact, carved by storms, sharpened by solitude. That's why you look unpredictable to people who only know how to walk straight lines. They follow algorithms. You follow momentum. They chase approval. You chase truth. You're not a resume gap. You're a revolution wearing a calm face. And that's the threat they'll never be able to quantify. Number 6. The legend that destroyed their little maps. They can't track you because greatness built in chaos doesn't leave breadcrumbs. Your enemies obsess over origin stories. They need to know who shaped you, who guided you, who gave you permission to rise, because if they can trace your path, they can pretend it was predictable. They can file you under a category. They can shrink you down into something they understand. But your story laughs at their need for order. You weren't crafted in a classroom. You were sparked in collisions. You didn't learn from mentors, you learned from mayhem. You didn't grow from comfort, you grew from gravity dragging you down until you built your own upward force. You didn't rise because someone chose you. You rose because refusing to sink was the only option that didn't kill your spirit. Imagine them staring at your timeline like it's a broken GPS. One moment you crash, then you vanish, then you rise again out of nowhere with new strength they can't explain. Their charts don't fit you. Their equations don't hold you. Their logic fails you. You break every pattern they rely on to feel smart. And here's where the myth begins. Imagine a flower blooming through concrete. No gardener, no sunlight, no guidance, just raw will. The concrete cracks. The bloom rises. People walk by stunned, asking, "How? That's you. You grew where nothing was supposed to live." And that alone shatters every theory they worship. Imagine a phoenix, but not the pretty storybook version. The real one where burning hurts and rising isn't glamorous and the ashes cling to your skin. That's the version you lived. Not poetic, not magical, just real, painful, earned rebirth they never had to experience. That's why they stare. That's why they whisper. Imagine a map maker trying to chart an earthquake. Impossible. You don't follow lines. You redraw landscapes. You're proof that brilliance grows in cracks, that survival breeds precision, that pain produces power no institution can replicate. They expect linear progress, upward graphs, neat chapters, tidy growth. And you show up as a legend built from collapses, disappearances, and impossible comebacks. Legends make systems uncomfortable. They expose the truth they try to bury. Talent isn't granted by permission. It's forged by pressure. You didn't follow their map. You tore it apart and built your own terrain. And that's why you terrify them. Number 7. The syllabus that should have destroyed you but built a weapon instead. They call it trauma. You call it training. That one sentence is enough to make your enemies flinch because it exposes what they can't admit. Everything that should have broken you became curriculum. They expect people to rise from comfort, guidance, mentorship, and neat little case studies. But you had none of that. Your education wasn't inspiring. It was brutal. It wasn't structured. It was chaotic. And yet somehow you walked out of that chaos more calibrated than people who studied the same subjects in air-conditioned classrooms. They want you to tell a nice origin story with soft lessons and pretty metaphors. But your leadership training came from being the only person you could rely on. You didn't learn how to lead. You learned how to not fall apart when nobody shows up. That hits them harder than any degree ever could, because leadership rooted in survival has a different weight, one they can't imitate. Imagine this: they practiced persuasion during group presentations with safe feedback. You learned persuasion because survival demanded you convince yourself to keep going on days your mind wanted to quit. That's not a skill. That's a lifeline. And lifelines create instincts even experts can't match. They took classes on resilience. You lived through situations that tested it every day. Their resilience was rehearsed, yours was enforced. Their exercises were simulations, yours had real consequences. They learned teamwork through workshops where everyone politely cooperated. You learned teamwork in chaotic environments where betrayal didn't come with apologies, it came with impact. They call their challenges growth. You call yours Tuesday. And that line alone sums everything up. Here's a question you might feel inside. Why does your strength make them uneasy? Why do they react to your presence like you're holding a secret they don't want exposed? Simple. They know their credentials came from comfort. Yours came from collisions. They know their achievements were supported. Yours were self-generated. They know their lessons were gentle. Yours were surgical. They see trauma. You see data. Every heartbreak rewired your instincts. Every failure sharpened your reflexes. Every loss upgraded your awareness. You didn't get certificates. You got scars that function as credentials. You weren't coached. You were conditioned. And that's why when you walk into a room, they sense something they can't explain. Your survival syllabus made you someone they could never become. Number 8. The question that shattered their entire worldview. Your success isn't a miracle, it's a threat to everything they were taught to believe. That's the real earthquake under their feet. The second you walked into their perfectly organized system and outperformed people who had advisors, mentors, funding, guidance, and safety nets, you didn't just rise, you destroyed the myth they worshipped. You didn't bend their rules, you proved their rules were never real. They built their confidence on a lie, that power comes from structure, that superiority comes from credentials, that greatness comes from being chosen. But you're living proof that someone unmentored, unendorsed, unapproved and completely untamed can surpass all of them. And that truth crushes their belief system more brutally than any insult ever could. You're the human glitch that exposes the weakness of their entire program. Imagine this: a team trains for years with the best methods, perfecting every technique. Then someone who grew up learning by instinct walks in and beats all of them on day one. No training, no coaching, no structure, just raw evolution. What happens? Their belief system implodes. They start questioning everything they ever trusted. That's you. When someone like you succeeds, it forces them to face a truth they can't stomach. Their structure was never strength, just packaging. They studied emotional intelligence. You became emotionally bulletproof. They studied room dynamics. You walk in and read everyone in 5 seconds. They studied resilience theory. You survived the kind of storms theorists can't even describe. They learned models. You learned momentum. Here's a question that might echo in your mind. Why do they stare at you like you're impossible? Why do their voices shake when they speak to you? Why does your existence feel like an accusation? Simple. Your presence exposes their illusion. You show them that their hierarchy is fake, their methods outdated, their assumptions fragile. You prove that greatness doesn't require their approval. You prove that excellence can grow anywhere, even in places they wrote off as failures. You didn't come to be trained. You came to redefine what trained even means. And that's why that single question, who trained you, didn't reveal your weakness. It revealed theirs. Number 9, the school. They're too fragile to admit you survived. They earned credits. You earned consciousness. This is the truth they choke on every time they look at you. There's a school out there they pretend doesn't exist, because if they acknowledged it, every one of their degrees would look like decoration. They want to believe resilience comes from lectures, confidence from workshops, and emotional intelligence from slideshows. But you are living proof that the real curriculum happens in the fire, not the classroom. They sat in air-conditioned rooms, highlighting chapters on stability while you were stitching your life together with nothing but sheer will. They read about emotional regulation while you learned it by staying calm during disasters nobody else could handle. They practiced patience with apps and timers. You practiced it while waiting for better days that took years to show up. Their growth was optional. Yours was oxygen. Imagine this: they trained persistence by listening to motivational speakers. Meanwhile, you were learning persistence because quitting would have destroyed you. They rehearsed leadership in group projects when no one had anything to lose. You learned leadership by becoming the only person you could rely on when everyone disappeared. That isn't education, it's evolution. Every scar you carry is a diploma they could never earn. They try to act like your strength is dramatic or excessive, but deep down they know the truth. Your growth wasn't admirable, it was mandatory. You didn't learn through examples, you learned through consequences. You didn't observe situations, you lived them with stakes they've never tasted. You didn't just adapt, you evolved mid-impact, mid-crisis, mid-collapse. While they were taught formulas, your heartbreaks became formulas. While they studied theories, your disasters became data. While they prepared for exams, you prepared for survival. Imagine them trying to match your curriculum. Years of pressure, loss, betrayal, rebuilding, analyzing, recalibrating. They wouldn't last a semester. That's why they minimize your experience. Admitting it would mean admitting you operate on a level their system can't produce. You didn't graduate. You upgraded. You became a walking algorithm of instinct, precision, and intuition, crafted by storms they'll never encounter and shaped by moments they couldn't handle. And that's the school they hope nobody ever mentions, because you mastered what they'd collapse under. Number 10. The blueprint they'll never replicate, no matter how hard they study you. They can copy your steps, but they'll never survive the path that made them. That single truth burns them more than anything else. Their entire world revolves around formulas, models, step-by-step strategies, systems built to manufacture success like it's a product on a shelf. But you ruined the whole assembly line by existing. You are the one outcome their system can't mass produce, the one blueprint they can't steal because it wasn't written on paper. It was carved into your spirit. They imitate your moves with the hope they'll unlock your magic, but your moves weren't moves. They were moments of survival. They were desperate choices, breaking points, reinventions that happened when nobody clapped and nobody cared. You weren't designed, you were demanded. Your growth didn't come from planning. It came from pressure. It came from nights where surrender looked easier, but wasn't an option. Imagine this. They study you like a scientist studying a lightning strike. They take notes, observe patterns, analyze behavior. But lightning can't be bottled. It can't be taught. It can't be repeated on command. That's why they're obsessed and infuriated. They want a method where there is none. They want instructions for a journey they'd never survive. You're the glitch in their education, the exception that breaks their rules. They call your success luck because the truth is too painful for them. Your greatness was earned. They call it mystery. You call it the bill you had to pay. You didn't rise for applause. You rose because breaking wasn't an option. You became the version of yourself that only appears when life corners you and demands transformation. No guide, no mentor, no strategy, just raw evolution. Your blueprint is unstealable because it requires suffering their comfort-trained hearts could never endure. It requires silence they run from, pressure they avoid, collapse they fear, and rebirth they're not built for. You built yourself when no one was watching, when no one believed, when no one helped, when no one stayed. Now they finally understand the truth they hoped wasn't real. You are not a product of their world. You are the proof of its limits. You rose without their approval. You mastered what they gatekept. You became the anomaly they can't explain away. And chosen one, if this message hit home, hit like, subscribe, and drop 777 in the comments, not for luck, but as your signature that says, I was never trained, and I still became everything they feared.